Alright, car lovers. Today I'm going to give you a kind of like a small tutorial on DSLRs, and because I've been filming now for quite some time, I've been learning about this stuff, and I thought I'd make a nice user-friendly video. There's a lot of videos out there, but they're not always user-friendly. So I think if you started doing photography, you probably had one of these, right? This is what's called a point and shoot camera, and you basically point, poof, and you shoot, right? And then after that, as the phone cameras started getting better, well, I know for my videos on YouTube, I used my iPhone, right? This thing does really good videos. And so turn that off. And then one of my ex-girlfriends bought me for a present. She bought me a, was it her that bought, I can't remember. Did I buy that, or it doesn't matter. I got myself a DSLR. And what does DSLR stands for? I always forget. Digital Single Reflex Lens. I think that's what it's called. Let's look at it.
DSLR.
What is it called? Digital Single Lens Reflex Camera. Yeah, all right. So, what that means is not important. What's important is that this is kind of like the next level kind of camera. So you look at your image through here, or as this Canon T5i has a little screen here that allows you to see what's going on. It's very useful when you're doing video, that actually. But let's look at it from a classical point of view. So let's look at it. There's a mirror there at a 45-degree angle, right? So the light comes in here, bounces off that mirror, goes up here, is reflected this way, and then is reflected that way into the viewer. All right, so that's how that works. So it's boom, 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 boom into your eyes. Now, let's turn it on. Okay, now it's on. Nothing happened here. Nothing happened. So I'm going to use my iPhone to see what you can see in the camera. So if I go like this, right? Hold on. Put the video on. All right. Now I'm recording. There's like a blurry white image. And that's normal. There's no lens in front, right? So, having that said, now I'm going to take a picture and I want you to look at what happens to the lens. So I'm going to turn this camera on. I'm going to go like this just to make sure everything is set fine. Okay. So I'm going to go and take a picture. I want right like this. Now a lot happened right there. A lot happened. I think it's better if we look at it in slow motion, right? And we'll be able to see what happens. So I'm going to put the camera like this. I'm going to take my iPhone and I'm going to go into slow motion mode. That way we'll be able to see exactly what happens. Let's look at it. Boy, that's fast. That was slow down and that was pretty fast. We're going to watch it one more time slower, and then we're going to watch it another time even slower. So we get a grapple. There he goes. The mirror's coming up and the sensor's being revealed. Then the mirror comes down. Now that flat black substance over the sensor is the shutter. Now that shutter opens from up to down. The sensor behind it takes a scan of whatever it's seeing from top to bottom, and then the shutter closes from top to bottom. We're going to look at it again. Mirror goes up. Now watch the shutter. It's going to come down real fast. Boom. It's down. That sensor is now taking the image starting from the top horizontally to down horizontally. You're going to see the shutter close from the top all the way down. Boom. That's it. That picture is taken. Now the mirror is going to come back to where it was at a 45-degree angle. That is exactly what is happening in your camera. So as you see, a lot happened. let's just go over that territory. The light came in, the mirror got out of the way, the shutter opened to reveal the sensor captured the light, took the picture, and then the shutter closed and the mirror came back in front. Okay? And you can see this when you're taking the picture. If you look in the viewfinder, let's do that again. All right. So I'm going to take a video of this right now. All right, that looks pretty good. Hold on. Record. You see, it went dark. It went dark. That's the mirror coming up, no longer reflecting into the viewfinder. So that's what's happening. So now you know what's happening. Now, it gets even more subtle. That sensor, when it turns on, that sensor inside the camera, when it turns on, it doesn't take a full picture. It starts at the top and goes down line by line really fast. Like if you could take a second and separate it, I don't know, like 1,000, like you could just separate the second, like it would just go right down. And it would take a tiny horizontal picture really fast until it got down to the bottom of the sensor. And we can see the effect of that in this camera with what we call the rolling shutter. Now the rolling shutter, and there's a video right here, well, video is playing right now. And basically when you move from left to right really fast, the bottom part will be earlier in time than the top part. Now you're gonna say, Christopher, you said that the sensor starts taking the picture from the top and works its way down. Well, here's the weird thing what happens. Let's put the lens in this. This is your lens. And I just took off the cover now. And you have to take off the back cover. And if you look at Canon lenses, they have these little white or red points here. All right, here's the white one. And if you look at the camera right here, there's a white one also. So what you do is, you don't be afraid. You just, where's the white thing here? All right, you just put it the white, boom. And then you turn clockwise and it'll make a very satisfying click. There you go. You know it's in. All right. So the light comes in like this. Now the lens is kind of like this. The light hits the lens, refracts, goes up, and by the time it comes out, it refracts the second time. It'll have done sort of like this, poof, and it goes down. And from the bottom, it's the same thing. It refracts twice, and boom, according to the shape of the lens, it'll bend the light in a certain way. So the light's coming like this, hits the lens, and then starts going down real fast, and this bottom one starts going up. And around right about here, whoop, it flips. So by the time the light hits your sensor, it's seeing an upside down image. So that way, so if you think of a man standing, the head will be at the bottom and the feet will be at the top, and the sensor starts, it takes its image like that. It starts at the top of the center, captures the light, every horizontal line, and goes all the way down. That's why the feet in the picture, if you're taking like a picture of a moving object, or you're moving the camera a lot, it doesn't matter, any fast motion, the camera is taking, the top part is an infinitesimally small fraction sooner than the bottom part of the lens, and therefore, since the image is being inversed, the head is more behind in time than the feet. So this is the guy's head, and this is his legs. This is the image. By the time it hits the lens, it's like this. So the lens catches the feet first, the body, and then the head. That is pretty complicated stuff to know. that is the rolling shutter effect. So that's how your camera works. That's how the sensor works. It works from top to bottom, but the image is getting its upside down. So now we know how the sensor works. So all this is about light, right? And do you ever notice, like, when you're taking pictures at night, like it comes out like, I don't know, like everything's like reddish yellow, or, well, in the daylight, there's a lot of light, right? So your cameras usually do a good job. Now, there's different types of light. There's light from the light bulbs, there's light from outside, there's cloudy light. And all those, if your sensor, like your sensor has to know what kind of light is coming in for it to take the right type of picture in order to account for what we call the temperature of the light. Now, baller photographers usually refer that as Kelvin, but that really doesn't really matter that. What's really important is that there's a correction that your camera does. Now, with these things here, the iPhone and everything, it does it automatically. And if you put the DSLR in automatic mode, it will do it automatically. However, you can do it yourself. Like the goal of, like, I guess, good photography or good videos is eventually, as you become more comfortable, you correct everything. Now, sometimes it's a pain in the ass and you just don't bother, but sometimes, like, it can be slightly rewarding if you get it right. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna turn my camera on right now. So this is really what you would be seeing in the viewfinder if you were taking a picture. Now I've got it in full manual mode, all right? That's what it looks like. And you're gonna see there's a bunch of things here. So I was talking about light correction. What they call it is white balance. Basically, you wanna make sure that the white is real white, and you want the camera to adjust for other light in order to make sure that the colors come out correctly. So the first thing you do when you take a picture is you correct for white balance. And let's look at the different types. There's in sunlight, there is shade, cloud, tungsten light. Look at how that changed. Look at how everything became really blue. Fluorescent light. Notice how this is different than this. Look at the yellow, how different it is. All right, flash. And then, of course, there's custom. That's to do a manual adjustment. I won't cover that in this video, but it's pretty easy. But really, these touches, this is the first step before you take a picture or video. You make sure your white balance is correct. All right? So that's number one. And number two, what you have here is called the shutter speed. Right here. Let's take a look at it. Now, it's always 1 second divided by the number you see here, right? And what's important here is that the shutter speed is that shutter that we saw in the video, I'll show it again, is opening and letting light in for a set amount of time. So here, it's letting it in for 1 second. So if I were to take a picture, it would let light in for 1 second. And this is the kind of image it would create. Here, it's 0.5 seconds, right? 0.5 seconds. So the picture got a little darker. Think about it. If you think about it, your shutters are like your eyelids. So the camera's always got its eyes shut until you take a picture. Then it opens its eyes. And depending on the shutter speed, like if it's for 2 seconds, it'll open its eyes like this. 1, 2. And if it's for like a fraction of a second, it'll go like this. Now, you know that you see a lot better if you keep your eyes open than if you just open them really fast, right? It's the same thing with the camera. It lets in a lot more light. The goal is that it lets in a heck of a lot more light, all right? So this is 1 second divided into 4, that's 0.25 seconds. 1 second divided into 8, that's 0.125 seconds. 1 second divided into 15. 1 second divided into 30. 1/30th of a second, imagine. 1/60th of a second. 1/125th of a second. 1/250th of a second. That's really fast. 1/500. And you notice that the picture in the viewfinder is always getting darker and darker, because the less you open your eyes, the less you leave your eyes open per opening. So for example, if you open them really fast and you close them, the less you're going to see. And in the camera, that translates itself into a darker image. It means something else too, but I mean, for our purposes, it means a darker image. All right? So let's go look at what the shutter's doing when I take pictures at various levels of shutter speed. This is 1/15 second. One 1/25th. So I think you saw how that works. Once again, the shutter from top to bottom, opening, allowing the light to hit the sensor from top to bottom, because that's the way the sensor works. It works from top to bottom, capturing the light, and it can be really fast. So that's one thing, all right? So you want the lightness and the darkness of the picture to be controlled with your shutter speed, because you don't want a too bright a picture, but you don't want a too dark one. Now, what else does shutter speed do? By taking a very quick picture, if somebody's running, the sensor will capture the image so fast that there will be no blurring. So for example, if you're taking a picture of something that's moving fast and the sensor goes like this, well, during that period, the subject will have moved and this will cause a blur. All right? That's what's happening. So for example, something's moving fast, shutter opens, it's moving, shutter closes, I'm going to get a blur. We and our eyes see it as movement, but the camera's taking a still picture. It's not taking a video, and that's what causes the blur. So, however, if I'm looking at something that's moving fast, once again, and I go poof, open fast, the fact that I open and close my eyes so fast, even though that object is moving really fast, it's standing still. That's what's happening with the camera. That's shutter speed. Okie dokie. So now we've done shutter speed. Moving along, I'm going to bring you guys back in here. So this was the shutter speed right here. Now we have to look at, the next thing you're going to look at is your ISO. Now what does the ISO mean? By moving the ISO, check this out. What's going on here? Looks like the shutter speed, right? The more I move left, the darker the picture becomes. Well, actually the shutter speed, it was different, right? It was the more you move to the left, the brighter the picture was becoming. And here when I'm doing it, check it out. All right. Actually, I like better. All right, so let's go to ISO. So what does that mean, ISO? ISO refers to like the type of film. Before people used film, right? And ISO, what it means is not really important. What's important is it's like the ability of the film that you're shooting on to receive light. And the closer you are to 100, the sharper your image will be, but the less sensitive it will be to light. And this is done digitally with this camera. They just use the same term, right? So the higher I go up, the more sensitive to light the film is, or the camera is. However, the more grainy the picture is. And the higher up you go, the more grainy the picture becomes until it becomes unusable. All right? So my point is that when you're taking pictures, like with this type of camera, with the Canon, it should preferably be 400 or less. You can go up to 800, but after 800, the pictures are becoming pretty useless. You need to use other tricks to get enough light in. So to go over that territory, the ISO level refers, in the case of a digital camera, the sensitivity setting of the sensor. The next thing here is the f-stop. So what does that mean? That's really aperture. All right? What is aperture? Look in somebody's eye, and the iris, the black part, that's the part that lets the light into your eye. And so for example, when it's dark, that black part of your eye, that black circle in the center, gets bigger to let more light in. And if you go outside in the sunlight, that aperture or opening will get smaller. In camera talk, this is called aperture. And if we look carefully, I want to show this to you guys so you guys get it. Let's take a look at this. So the smaller the number, the bigger the opening is. The bigger the number, the smaller the opening is. Now you'll notice that the screen is just getting darker, right? The bigger the number, the darker the screen. And it makes sense, right? If the aperture or opening is less bigger, it's a very small hole, then there's less light coming in. However, if I bring it all the way up to 4, or down, I should say, to 4, that means the hole is getting bigger, and therefore you are getting more light in. So that was the aperture. There's one more thing about the aperture, is that the lower your aperture, that is to say, the longer, or I should say rather, the bigger the hole that is letting the light in, the more the background will be blurry. And what I mean to say is this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture at 3.5 f-stop, which is the size of the hole that is letting the light in, or the aperture. And then you'll be able to see the difference between a 3.5 aperture, and then I'll put it all the way to 22. I'll put it all the way to 22. And you're going to see the difference in the blurry background. Now notice there's some things I intentionally put this way. There's this cup here in the foreground. You can see that 7E right here. You can see that. And you can look at the background, the desk, and everything. You can look at the sharpness of those different things when I take those two different pictures. I'm just going to change the aperture. I'm going to try to make it the same lighting. Check it out. It's all about the light, right? So the first thing I do when I take a picture is, first of all, you're going to settle the white balance. And I always forget it, but you always have to settle the white balance first. That's the first thing you do. So once you've come upon the right white balance, then the next thing I do right away is I stick my ISO to 100, because I like nice, clear shots. All right, I don't want that grainy image. I know some people want that grainy image because it mimics film, but I just don't care. I don't want that. Now, the next thing I do is that when I'm taking pictures, I want the least, like I want to be focused on the subject. Unless, like when I'm doing a landscape, I'll bring this up to 8, right? Between 5.6 and 8. I'll never go really higher than that. Sometimes when it's really bright outside, I'll bring it up. I won't have a choice. So you see in the house, it's very dark, but if I turn outside, that's about right. Unless you're taking a picture of somebody's face, this should really be 8, between 5.6 and 16, right? Okay. And then the last thing I will do is the shutter speed. And if it's a moving object, well, you got to kind of like put it at 1/60th, right? Once again, if you go to 1/60th, that looks really bad. But if you go outside, all of a sudden, whoop, it looks good. You know what I mean? If I were to focus this. So that's the way you do it. And you have to experiment, and you have to look at videos, and you have to do all this stuff to try to figure it out. Now, so that is the basic function of a camera.